We entered the house in some danger, and I painted the horrible sight of murder.
This is a direct quote from an Israeli Jewish painter named Esther Luries, who was commissioned by Avraham Torrey to paint the horrors of the Holocaust. Through her remaining paintings, we are able to see firsthand the Kovno ghetto.
Imagine painting the murders of your people, your neighbors, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your teachers, your friends, single-handedly documenting the history that your ancestors will be taught.
How were so many people okay with this mass murder regime, and why were those involved not repulsed by their actions? In order to answer this question, it's important to examine the underlying cause of this malicious attack on the Jewish population across Europe.
After World War I, the humiliation of losing the war and having to deal with the repercussions, Germany was at an all-time low economically, politically, and morally. To deal with their problems as a nation, they scapegoated the Jews and blamed them for multiple things such as spreading typhus, being disloyal, and being the reason for losing the war.
Der Giftpilz, or The Poisonous Mushroom, is a German children's book published in 1938 intended as anti-Semitic propaganda. The story goes like this. A young boy and his mother go out into the woods to pick mushrooms, a favorite German pastime. While in the woods, the mother explains to the boy that mushrooms are like people. Good mushrooms equal good people. Bad mushrooms or poisonous mushrooms equal bad people. The most poisonous mushrooms are the Jews and must be dealt with for the safety of the world. One mushroom or Jewish person can destroy an entire people because the Jew is the devil in human form. It is Germany's obligation to warn the rest of the world about this terrible toadstool and thereby save humanity from destruction.
The Germans wanted to solve the Jewish problem once and for all. The first steps of the grand plan was to concentrate all the Jews in the cities called ghettos. The first ghetto was created in 1940 in Lodz, Germany. Over one-third of the Jewish population was concentrated into this ghetto. Later on, the Warsaw Ghetto became the largest, with 450,000 Jews crowded into an area of 1.3 square miles.
Conditions were unbearable. Cities were extremely crowded, unsanitary, and festering with disease. Starvation and harsh winters allowed mortality rates to skyrocket. The average prisoner in Warsaw Ghetto only got 300 calories of food per day.
Ghettos were of particular importance to the war because the Jews were forced to work and contribute to the German war machine, building weapons and making textiles. Over 700,000 concentration camp prisoners labored under brutal conditions and starvation. To facilitate communication and maintain order between prisoners and German authority, there was a Nazi-appointed Jewish council called the Judenrat and a Jewish police force in the ghettos.
Inhabitants of the ghettos were dedicated to recording Holocaust life through pictures, diaries, and art to document their truths despite what Nazi propaganda was distributing. One of these members was Avraham Torrey, who was a Jewish lawyer before his capture. His accounts were valuable because he was a member of the Judenrat and recorded discussions between the Germans and the Jewish Council that were largely unaccounted for anywhere else. Torrey was such a dedicated member to recording facts as precisely as possible that he commissioned artist Esther Luries to paint various scenes within the ghetto.
During the winter of 1941, Torrey took Luries to paint the remains of the Jewish hospital and orphanage which the Germans had locked and burned on October 4, 1941. All the inmates were killed: doctors, nurses, patients, and orphans. Esther Luries documented over 200 scenes with her painter's brush throughout her time at the Kovno ghetto. All 200 would have survived the war had she not asked for her paintings back. When the Kovno ghetto was burned in 1944, all the paintings except 30 burned with it. The 30 that are still intact were hidden by Torrey. A scene depicted by Luries shows a potato field in the village of a ghetto, with hungry people raiding the field and taking potatoes to eat. When it would happen, the Germans would shoot at the crowds, but people would still return. The drawing served as a beginning for Luries to continue capturing these moments and show what daily life was actually like, capturing real-life moments. In the village part of the ghetto, there were potato fields. After the gates were closed, crowds of hungry people began raiding the fields to remove the potatoes, though they were not yet ripe. The Germans used to shoot at them, but they would return at the earliest opportunity. From the window of one of the offices of the Jewish Committee, I succeeded in recording the raid on a potato field. The drawing was exhibited at a meeting of the Council of Elders. The place where I first set out to sketch was the reservat. The former school for handicrafts contained all the families who had been unable to obtain any other quarters. People lived in the big courtyard where they cooked on stones. There I found ample material, heaps and piles of furniture that had been transformed into queer barricades and now served as residential quarters. Here were children, old folk, all sorts of Jewish types. Life was going on everywhere, in every corner. Conversations and quarrels, some folk attending to various things while others just sat doing nothing or studied a book. When I sat down in the corner of the courtyard, I was promptly surrounded. My work interested them very much, and each and every one was prepared to help. Someone would stand nearby to warn me if the Germans came. The people very much liked the idea that I should make a permanent record of how it was.
From the inside, human morality is questionable. From the outside looking in, Nazi propaganda made it seem like the ghettos were safe and enjoyable for the Jewish people. They showed happy faces, Jewish people working, and showed an integration of Jewish communities within German life. Perhaps had the outside world seen this genocide for what it truly was, it might have been put to an end earlier.
Towards the end of 1944 into 1945, the Germans' Third Reich was coming to an end. The Allies were approaching closer and had liberated camps they captured. In January 1945, death marches from exterior concentration camps to interior camps began. Millions of prisoners walked for days and days on end and were exposed to brutal treatment, exposure, starvation, and exhaustion. Guards were ordered to kill prisoners who could not keep up or collapsed.
Many of the stories we hear from survivors tell of a collective suffering and life inside the camps and ghettos. The Jews had to band together in their time of weakness in order to combat the harsh mistreatment and persecution they were facing. Somehow the Jews kept a sense of community.
The Holocaust will forever hold a significant impact in human history. This tragic period of time teaches valuable lessons on society. The persecution, imprisonment, and genocide of the Jewish people show how a mass genocide can happen due to personal beliefs and illogical prejudices, but are so influential and acceptable when unchallenged due to blame and fear.
At this very moment, there is prejudice and hate towards certain religious communities, as well as racism and homophobia. Some use groups mentioned as a blame for things that happen in the world or feel the need to rid society of them simply because in their eyes they are different and inferior.
These examples we see every day are often overlooked but tie back to a much deeper meaning. This is what led to a mass tragedy that changed the world.